Hi guys, welcome tonight to Seminar 9. Can you believe we're up to Seminar 9 already?
I know.
I know, it's Seminar 9 already. Just before I do start, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm currently on. I'm here in Q on the land of the Wurundjeri people. I pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that to the lands that you're currently on as well. And I pay respect to elders past and present. But I'd also like to extend that to lands where you may have grown up on, because that could be somewhere completely different than where you are right now. And on behalf of AGECS, AGECS is located on the land of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people, and we pay respect to their elders past and present. Tonight we've actually got, hopefully we've got Aunty Reio coming in talking about the Grandmothers Against Removal, but has been having trouble. We knew she was coming in on her iPad, but has been having a lot of trouble logging in due to technical issues that we've all kind of faced at the moment. So she's rushing home to try to get on by 7, which is good because my first little bit of the presentation is a little bit about putting some things into a bit of a context for you. So yeah, Aunty Reio, I'll introduce when she comes on as well, but Aunty Reio is a Waka Waka Bundjalung elder. And she's also, here she is.
AJ, she's here. Yes, I'll let her in.
Cool, Aunty Reio's just come through now. Hey, coming in with Tash. Yep, so I'm just going to put some things in context before we throw over to Aunty Reio.
Hello.
Hello. We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, now can you see us?
See you too. So I'm going to put Aunty Reio and Tash. We're going to just talk a little bit about child protection in general, and then we're going to throw over to you guys in about 10 minutes or so. Cool? Yep, that's fine. So just a little bit, it could be a little bit of a trigger warning through this workshop. We are talking about kids in care. We are talking about high numbers of Aboriginal kids that still remain in child protection.
Sorry, I didn't realise that you can see my face so closely.
And you know, as a kid myself that was in care, I just wanted to.
Could you talk up a bit, please, AJ?
I'm talking as loud as I can.
Because I can't hear.
Let me see if I can put it on the car Bluetooth.
Okay.
You kids need to be very quiet now.
Let me just mute them for a second. So yeah, just a bit of a trigger warning. For those that don't know me, my name's AJ Williams, and I'm moderating this event tonight. I'm a Wiradjuri man from Dimbola Horsham and Watchabullock from Dimbola Horsham. So I just want to put a couple of things just in a bit of perspective. Every state and territory actually is responsible for statutory child protection. In Victoria, the department is at the moment now the Department of Fairness, Families and Housing. If you are talking to community, they will refer to it through a number of different names, their previous acronyms, such as DHHS, which was the Department of Housing and Human Services, DHS, and still growing up when I was a kid, it was CSB. Oops. So a couple of things to just, again, put in a bit of a context, a little bit about Australia's spending. That in 2020 to 2021, the national recurrent spending on child protection and out-of-home care was about $6.2 billion. That was an increased spending over the past 5 years, and each year there's been about $385 million more spent on kids in out-of-home care. That's actually, when you look at that, it's quite a lot of money that's actually being spent. In 2021 too, there was more than 178,800 children supported by state and territory child protection. And this is in general, this is both Indigenous and non-Indigenous kids. From that, figures, we know that there was 531,900 notifications on about 293,600 children and 68,000 substantiations on about 49,700 kids. What we do know is that on June the 30th, 2021, there was 46,200 children in out-of-home care. When you look at some of those numbers, they are quite large if we're looking at it. A little bit on the Indigenous data, we know that in 20 to 21, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children were 10 times more likely to be removed from their families compared to non-Indigenous children. And 14,600 Indigenous children were a subject of a substantiation, with emotional abuse being about 48% of all substantiations, followed by neglect at 31%. This actually equals to about 1 in 23 Aboriginal children with a substantiation. As of June 2021, 24,200 Indigenous children were on a care and protection order, and of these, 69%, which is around 16,700, were on guardianship or custody orders, which is quite a lot. It's like nearly 70%. 1 in 17 Indigenous children, around 19,500, were in out-of-home care, almost 2/3 of whom were living with relatives, kin, or other Indigenous carers. And 5,400 children who were reunified in 2021, nearly 1 out of 3 were Indigenous, which is only about 1/3 of it. What else do we know? This is for Victoria, that the numbers and proportion of children by Aboriginal status out of, so you can actually see here that Aboriginal kids made up 27%.
Excuse me,
AJ.
we can't see anything. It's just a white screen. It says it's your computer, but we can't see the figures. So.
Oh my God, I don't know what's happening.
There we go.
Yeah, that's better.
I'll just go back a little bit. Have you seen any of these figures?
No, it's been a white screen the entire time. Sorry, AJ, I sent you a message. I didn't want to interrupt your flow.
That's all
but
right.
I realised now you wouldn't have been able to see it.
So we've got the 178,800 kids, 531,900 notifications on 68,000 kids, on substantiations on 49,700 kids, that 46,200 children were out of home care, that 14,600 Indigenous children were the subject of substantiation, emotional abuse being 48%, followed by neglect, that Aboriginal kids are 10 times more likely to be removed from their families. And this is of June 2021. I said of guardianship orders and custody orders, about 70% of our kids are on guardianship and custody orders. The majority of non-Indigenous kids are actually on what they call a supervision order. But 1 out of 17 Indigenous children were in out-of-home care. Two-thirds are living with a relative, and 5,400 children were reunified, and that's only 1.3. It's 1 out of 3, so about 31% were Indigenous. If you're looking at the Victorian data, children on protection orders, 27% of all kids are Aboriginal kids, which again is nearly 1/3. If you're looking at investigations, we are looking at from as of June 31st, 13.2% identified as being Aboriginal. And the number and proportion of children by Aboriginal status here, and this is for children in care, was 2,529, or nearly 30%, which is about 1/3 of the kids in care are currently Aboriginal. We do know that, the ABC reported early this year that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in Victoria are 16 times more likely to be removed from their families by Child Protection Services non-Indigenous kids, which is higher than the national average. Muriel Bamblett, CR VACA, actually quoted this saying, "I think as a nation we should be really sort of shocked and horrified by the current statistics of Aboriginal kids currently in care." Now, we do know that when kids go into the child protection system, that anyone, any concerned party can actually report suspicion of child abuse and neglect. Whether you're a community member, a professional, some children ring up themselves to talk a bit about what's been happening, parents and other relatives. Now, with the statistics around child protection, there is a child protection process, and you guys will get a copy of this as well. So I'm just going to go through it really quickly, but there's a report, obviously, to the state and territory, and if there's a report of concerns of welfare and a child, it goes to intake. Every one of the ones in coloured is where the stats come from. So the reports on the welfare don't get reported, but the child protection notifications do. Okay, so then if there's a notification, there's an investigation, and it's either substantiated or not substantiated, or it's not investigated. And those are the ones that the statistics of what actually gets publicised. They're the ones in colour are where the statistics actually come from. If the child is safe, yes, there's provision of case management and referrals as required. And if the child's safe, the case is often closed, and then they exit the system straight away. Oops, sorry. If there's an investigation and it might choose that they're not investigated, it will go to secondary supports. There might be an investigation and it's not substantiated. Now, it's not substantiated does not mean it didn't happen. It means there's just not enough evidence to actually make a ruling that yes, this abuse did occur. If there's a yes, again, if there's a child's at safe no, then they'll actually go to care and protection order with case management, which might result in out-of-home care or other placement options. And then from these placement options, they'll actually make a decision whether the kid's permanently placed. And if the child's safe, they might be reunified, and hopefully with the option of exiting the system. We don't really want our kids in the child protection system long term. But that's just a little bit of an I just wanted to provide you with a little bit of a child protection process there. And just to highlight that when we are talking about the statistics, they're actually coming from notifications, investigations, substantiations, care and protection, out of home, reunification and placements. That's where they kind of fit. Does that make sense? Yeah. I just wanted to jump over to youth justice as well, because a lot of kids in care, especially if they're put into a group home setting, often end up in juvenile justice as well when they're older. And I just wanted to show you that from 2021 that 14% of all children and young person involved in youth justice identify as being Aboriginal, 80% were male, 20% were female, 30% are 18 years or older, 66% are aged 14 to 17, 4% are aged 10 to 13. That out of all the cases, 37 were in metro and 63 were in regional. So a little bit of a perspective. But being in care, that there are some Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander child placement principles. And I'm going to ask Aunty Reio and Tash to talk a little bit about what doesn't work really well in the system. But the 5 core elements of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander child placement principle is around prevention, partnership, placement, participation and connection. And it should be worked on a continuum, but we do see a lot of loopholes in each one of those areas that are actually causing our kids to actually stay in care more often. Now, some of the reasons for investigations in out-of-home care and why kids still remain at a high rate are that they're less likely to access early childhood education, high rates of socio and economic disadvantage, poverty, overcrowded housing, family violence situations, the institutional racism, the lack of involvement in decision-making, the lack of appropriate family members seen as carers, insufficient home visits, the over-reporting, a lot more substantiations on greater levels compared to non-Indigenous kids, material disadvantage, less likely to be reunified, deficiencies in the provision of cultural care, despite there being a compulsory cultural plan that needs to be designed for every kid, Aboriginal kid who's out of care, and very inconsistent monitoring of the actual principles themselves. So we do know that Child Protection themselves have admitted that the system isn't working 100%. VACA, the Victorian Aboriginal Childcare that we spoke to a number of sessions ago, they admitted themselves too that the system isn't working really effective. But there is a group of people who are I just wanted to say that, and by large, Indigenous children and young people in the general population perform worse on certain educational, psychological and social measures in comparison to non-Indigenous children and young people. And this also appears to be the case for those involved in foster care systems. So the impact on kids. But we also need to realise that kids in care actually, can you see this at all coming up?
No. White screen again.
I don't know what's happening. Can you see that?
There we go. Yep.
Yep. We do know the impact that care has on Indigenous kids is a loss of identity, loss of family contact, especially through parents, siblings, grandparents, loss of contact with country, loss of cultural knowledge and experiences, self-esteem and self-image issues, an increase in self-harming behaviour. In group home settings, mixing with individuals with criminal records, participating in criminal activities for acceptance, trying to balance being in two worlds, often questioning of identity and self. They're less likely to complete year 10 and year 12, and they're more likely to be a younger parent themselves. So there are a group of people, and I'm so happy that they've come on tonight to actually talk, and I'm so glad to be part of GMAR myself. But we've got Aunty Reio and Tash, which is right here, that's going to actually talk to you a little bit more about what GMAR actually does to try to help kids and families not be in the child protection system for as long as they possibly can. So Aunty Reio, how are you? Now she's on mute. You're on mute. Sorry. Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, darling, how are you?
Cool. You might have to speak up.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm talking as loud as I can. Can you hear me?
Can we hear?
Oh,
Yeah.
why?
So, hey, Aunty Reio,
Right.
can you tell us how GMAR was formed?
Well, unfortunately, GMAR was formed many years ago, I reckon since colonisation. But we now got a name. This is something that I've been doing for many years. And I was nearly a product of the stolen genetics that mum and dad kept us out in the bush. But the things that I've been doing has now got a name called GMAR, which is Grandmothers Against Removal, and we founded that in 2018. We had Aunty Hazel come down from Sydney, and that's a New South Wales grandmothers against removal. So we do more than the ones in New South Wales where they sort of lobby and go to the government and all that, which we want to do later on. But we do the practical things like supervised access. We want to ensure that parents and children get their access with their parents. We want to ensure that we work alongside the department to look at the cultural plan for the child if they're in out of home care, if they're, with non-Aboriginal families. We do a lot of things, like we have support and monitoring as grandparents do. So we basically, I guess you can see us as being the village that raised a child, because we'll go in and help that dad or that family or that grandmother. But the more we
help the family, not just the child.
Yeah, well, the family's our client per se, not just the child. And we find it amazing that when we go to court, the department's there trying to keep children away from their family, and unfortunately back is sitting with them, and we're saying, well, what are you doing? And they say, well, the child is our client. And I said, well, last time I seen a child, they had parents. And if we're going to endorse this as an Aboriginal, and I say when I talk about Bacca, because they've got some awesome programs, but again, it's that, I guess, big white Bawana mentality of saying, well, we have to ensure that we run the case from your perspective, which is Bacca's got all these programs, but you can't get into those programs without being referred by the department. So where's the self-determination in that? So that's where the system breaks down. So, GMAR does a lot of things, but it's on a grassroots level. We don't sort of, I don't know how to say it, because we're very passionate. We don't want this to happen to our mob, and yet when we go in and we help the families, and 6 times out of 10 families, children are returned and reunited, that's saying something. So when we look at a case, we don't look at the case and say, okay, we're going to dismiss the concerns. We actually look at the concerns and we say, all right, well, what can we do to support this family so that you don't have concerns? Which in actual fact, we're acknowledging the fact that we don't play a role in the care of our community children. The department does. And how does that happen? Every time something happens, I say, all right, who was the Aboriginal rep when you walked into that family's home and took the children with police? Where was Vaka? Where was Lakijika? Oh, we don't have to tell them. I said, well, is it, and this is what we do. We talk in a layman's terminology. We go to court. We even if we just go to court and sit there and hold mum and dad's hand and say, we're here for you. That helps. But that's what we do. We have no money. We just go and get trains, trams, and buses to court to help the families. But those statistics you're talking about, AJ, is so alarming. And I'm wondering, and I'm talking as an angry woman here, an angry grandmother, an angry Aboriginal, community member, as to am I asking the right question? What are our black politicians doing? They were all worried about the earth and all that. Well, why worry about the earth if our children are not going to be around? That's how we put it in simple terms, and that's how we want to know why is our children are being kept away from, even though the parents are jumping through the hoops, they're complying with a lot of stuff, and we see some rogue, and I'm telling you, rogue workers in the department, even to say so much as, well, we don't have to listen to you, you're not even incorporated. I go, but we're the Aboriginal community, we support people. we want to work collaboratively with you. So, you know, it's when we say, have you done, is the child getting sibling access? Is the child getting access with mum and dad? In all of that, sometimes in some bad cases, parents are not having access. We're wondering why. The department said, well, he was sick the other day. I said, well, does the mum and dad have to see a medical certificate? Mind you, we can ask this if the child is only on an interim accommodation order. You know, if the child was on another order where the department ordered to the secretary, mum and dad may not, you know, have privilege to the medical certificates. But all of that because our mob don't know how to talk to.
So I think Aunty Rio's frozen at the moment. And while Aunty Rio's frozen for a second, I just want to point out a couple of things that she said. Oh, here she's back.
Yep.
Aunty Rio, what would you, in your experience, why do you think there are more Aboriginal kids in care?
Racism. Have a look at it. Have a look at it. We're the 3%ers and we're overrepresented. And when we go to courts, we can't, you've got to have money to even say, oh, I want to appeal that decision. Because legal aid is not, you can't afford legal aid to appeal an order, to vary an order, to oppose an order. You actually got to pay the lawyers money if you want to do all those things. So in actual fact, it looks like the parent doesn't want to fight for the child, but the fight's already done. You know, we're always starting from the.
It also comes down to.
Hey, Tash, can you put the volume up a bit?
I'm not sure how to.
No, you take it off.
Okay.
It's the charger. It's not. I'm also aware that it also comes down to privilege as well. Like a lot of our people didn't have the privilege of generational wealth and, you know, stuff like that. So we were born into, you know, poverty and stuff like that. So therefore, we was always kept down. And therefore, that's why a lot of our children are being taken as well because of the poverty line and all that stuff. And that's what we want to do as GMAR, to work with the family, not just the kid, but we can work with the family to let them know that the different resources that are out there, let them know that they do have support. And I want to just let you know, as a witness to a lot of work that my mum does, is a lot of the time, it's just having mum there as a voice, as a support person to speak their terms to our families. Because a lot of our families don't even understand the lingo and all that stuff that is spoken in those courtrooms and all the jargon and all that. Whereas we as GMAR, we understand a lot of that from our own experiences. So we're there to support the families and to help them understand what's really going on and what's you know, read in between the lines and stuff. And a lot of the time also, we speak up on behalf of the family to the authority figures, to support the family and to let them know that, hey, the family, they're not just Jackie Jacks, or they're not just someone out of your university case study books. You know, this is real life here. This is, you know, you're really playing Monopoly with people's families. You know, so that's what we do as well. We also advocate on that personal side for the families too. And that's what a lot of our families don't have. They don't have somebody who can talk on their behalf, who's strong enough, like my mother, to stand up against these politicians and their lawyers and judges and everything and tell them straight up in true honesty what's what. And that's why their kids are getting taken, because they don't know how to speak for themselves. They don't know how to stand up and, you know, like a lot of them don't even know their rights, a lot of our clients, you know. So that's a very big part of what GMAR does, as well as advocating, you know, behind the scenes business stuff with the politics and all that. Yeah.
And you guys are not funded. We know that.
Yeah.
How-
We don't get money at all. We don't get paid for anything we do.
No.
No.
How many GMARs are there exactly? Like how many, where we're talking about how many people are working on the ground to actually help families?
We have eight across Victoria. So there's one in Mildura, one in Echuca, one in Warragul, Bairnsdale. There's three down here, right? Yeah, in the metro. But you know, COVID gave us a new way of working, and except for me, because I used to put my PPEs on, don fully and go and sit down and actually ensure that parents have supervised visits with their children or monitored visits with their children. So that's only because I have a background with the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service. I'm a Aboriginal health practitioner. So, and that's what I bring to GMAR is the medical things and all that. It's so disheartening, and I'm not silly. I know there's times when children do need to be removed, and mum and dad looked at and say, look, let's have a reprieve. Let's see what we can do in the meantime. But when we see grandparents regarded as non-suitable because of something happened, didn't have working with children, and then they're not getting their working with children because they had a crime when they were 14, they're 60 now, but they still bring that up, which is just non-practical. I believe this world has gone mad since mandatory reporting. That's when the reports started going in and people just didn't know what to do. They just bang, 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 let's take the Aboriginals. You know, that's how it seems, and it's since mandatory reporting. I believe fully that, yeah, okay, if we can help families stay together, let's do it. And it's worked. We've seen it happen. Then we see some families that sort of can't. They've actually said they can't control, but we've ensured that the children go to family, not to non-Aboriginal family where they're losing their culture. I'm probably 2 cases a week. I ask the department, have they had sibling access? Have they had family, mum and dad have access? Do you have a cultural care plan? You know, have you had these families been afforded an AFLDM? Some been in the system for 4 years and still the department didn't say, let's have an AFLDM, which is an Aboriginal family-led decision-making meeting, and families sit down and talk. And then, as I'm saying that, okay, there is a place for child protection if we know that they're actually, protecting our children. But more cases than a lot, we wonder why they're saying they're protecting our children, because they're not, our children are suffering emotional trauma on the fact that they're saying, oh, it doesn't have to be, doesn't have to be substantiated. It's because if it's there, and you said it once before, AJ, if there's a likely, and I believe this applies to every child in the world, when a child is taken, that order, he was removed because he's likely to, or he may be physically assaulted, may be sexually assaulted, may suffer medical neglect. Now, that's the judge's grandchild, that's the judge's son, that's anybody's child. But bang, they come on down hard with that, and the judicial system needs to stop seeing that and have that colonial way of thinking that the right way is the right way. And I'm not going to apologize to anybody about how I talk, because that's how it is. That's how it is. And it's because I'm proof that when GMAR goes in and works alongside of VACA and the department, that child returns home. Before 2018, 4 children was taken off their mother, because they accused her of taking her children to witness a murder. Now, until we came right into it, and we go, at the end of the day, I had to say to the judge, "Oh, Your Honour, I fully believe that this mother didn't get her kids wrapped up in a blanket and say, 'Come on, I'll show you how man murders man.' The children were being protected, and unfortunately, a man was killed. When they don't look at it like that, and they take the children off the mother, that's wrong. That's so alarming, and this is why I believe all these the high rate of Aboriginal children is because of they don't good worker, an emphatic worker. 9 times out of 10 you'll see the department looking after the carers, but not the parents.
Yeah.
If the parents have a house or a car, like they do, and we've witnessed that they do give carers houses and cars to have children. Why can't they afford that for the parents, and support the parents to keep their children, in that family unit, to keep them with their mum and dad, with their nan, and things like that. And that's where we come from. That's it, and it's so disheartening. I get tired, but
And we've had the conversation a few times ourselves, where I'm not sure. I want to put it out there because this has been recorded as well. Is that the first option is to always place the kid with an Aboriginal family member. The problem is that the department doesn't deem many Aboriginal family members as appropriate,
right.
because historically, grandma lost her kids to the child protection system, which means that she's often ruled out as being a carer.
Yep.
The children that are being in foster care themselves are often sometimes ruled out because the caseworkers look at and go, well, what sort of parent are you? Because you haven't had a great parenting yourself. We've had young men that have been, and women that have been through the juvenile justice system, that get out of those systems but clean themselves up, and when their brother or sister's having trouble, put their hands up and go, hey, I can look after my kids, but they get ruled out because of their previous criminal record.
That's right.
And very soon that there is no Aboriginal family member deemed appropriate enough to...
You wonder how can the system, the judges, how can they sit there and make recommendations or orders about this? Do they really believe that the high rate of Aboriginal children taken is because all Aboriginal parents are bad parents? When there's investigations done, we had one said, "Oh, look, we're not going to go for a family reunification order. We're going to go for a security order." I said, "Well, why are you doing that? Mum and Dad's jumped through all the hoops." And they go, "Oh, well, there's too much of a risk." I said, "Well, how do you know there's a risk? That applies to everybody. That kind of thing applies to everybody. I mean, even my grandchildren, they're at risk of me medically neglecting them. They're at risk of me not feeding them. So that's your children. That's these other people's children. Everybody is at risk or may suffer, and yet they're coming down hard on the Aboriginal community.
Yeah.
No, and that's all around Australia. I don't know why. Yeah,
we have seen the research come through on case studies they've done between Aboriginal and non-Indigenous, especially in the juvenile justice setting, where a young Aboriginal boy will be charged with the same crime as a non-Indigenous kid, but the non-Indigenous kid gets a warning and the Aboriginal kid gets charged.
And it's fair to say that's racism. That's absolute racism. If you go and look at the Human Rights Charter, that is absolute racism. Even just it being we're the 3% of the population, and yet we're the high rate incarcerated, homeless, and removed.
Yeah.
That's absolute racism. We're going to hopefully chase that up. But look, we're just grandmothers. We go in and we help people. And if somebody wants to advocate for us, take it up to the next level, to the government or whatever, because I'm not going to wait for our black politicians to do anything, because they're too busy chasing rainbows. Really, I never ever heard any of them talk about our children that have been the high rate of children being removed. I've never heard them talk about it. You know, they want to get on the TV and all that and talk about this and talk about that. I've never heard talk about, oh, let's try and lower that rate. Let's find out why that rate is so high. You know, are all Aboriginal parents alcoholics and drug affected? Are all families domestic violence perpetrators? Well, I can say no,
Yeah.
because I know our clients. I believe that a lot of, if we have domestic violence perpetrated in our community, there's a lot more in the non-Aboriginal community. You know, because of our population. So, you know, we just need to address that.
We've got about 10 minutes.
Sorry.
That's right. I'm going to ask anybody if they've got any questions for you. Has anyone got any questions for Aunty Reio at this stage?
Who's that? Sue? Is it Sue? Who do we have here? Marie Wiggins and Tess B. Can you hear me, darling? Tess?
Has anyone got any questions at all, Aunty Reio?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Who was that?
Elena.
Alana. Yeah, go, Alana.
Hi, Aunty Reio.
Hey,
Thank
darling,
you.
how are ya?
Oh, I'm good. Look, thanks so much. I'm just pretty overwhelmed with what you've been saying, but with a little bit, I used to be a court support worker for women of domestic violence years ago, and the system, it's very easy to say, well, the system wouldn't do that. The system looks after it. And unless you kind of see what goes on, and I've seen nothing like what you're talking about, but little elements of that that are really disturbing, because it's just this big system, one size fits all, and things go under the radar. My question is, besides a donation, obviously, what can we do as early childhood professionals? Have you got any thoughts on what we can do, as particularly, like, I'm non-Indigenous, and
I think early childhood professionals should, I guess, be decolonising the way they're thinking that children should be brought up. You know, respect the Aboriginal culture and not think that one size fits all, or the white way is the right way, because we're finding that's slamming our families. And if we talk about culture, the screws get tighter on our families that are removed. But it's just have a understanding that, you know, some of these things are not substantiated when our children are taken. But like they say, they may have that thinking, oh, where there's smoke, there's fire, etc., etc. But, you know, do the investigation properly. Don't just have a one mind. Don't have a colonised mind that, you know, oh, they're in a overcrowded house, well, let's remove them. Oh, they're in, you know, there's no food in the cupboard. Well, sorry, but there's 2 tins of baked beans. That's regarded as food.
Or even they're sleeping on a mattress on the floor. You know, like, that's, if you're poor, that's frowned upon. If you're rich and you develop the Montessori style of sleeping on a mattress on the floor, then that's trendy. You know, that makes sense.
I've got here, and Nicole's just put down, is Aboriginal legal aid. Is there any Aboriginal legal aid workers? I assume legal aid was offered as a free service. Why isn't it offered to Aboriginal community members? It's actually not free in some cases, and it's also cost scaled as well. So you've got to be on a certain income to get, like, if you're on a healthcare card, you'll often get legal aid. But if you've actually been working and the cutoff's really low, it's like, I don't know, don't quote me right now, but it's like $28,000 a year. So, and then it becomes a bit sliding scale. And then when you get to another number, they go, no, you can afford your own lawyer.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
But
how it
the
kind of
thing
works.
is it's across the board, because we're forever wanting to appeal a decision. We're forever wanting to oppose a decision. We're forever wanting to vary an order. And all of those things does not come under legal aid. That's not Aboriginal legal aid, that's just legal aid in itself. So if you're not rich, you lose. And they run away with that shit. They do. They really do run away with it, because they know, oh, go and appeal. And they'll tell our clients that, they'll tell our families that. And then when we get into the nitty gritty, oh, you've got to pay for a lawyer to do that. We may have some lawyers that say, oh, well, look, we'll just do it, Or then we'll say, well, look, get families and get all your support, because we don't go to court with families like mum or dad, unless they actually engaged in support to help themselves, and therefore help them if their children were to be returned. So, and we do that even prior to a child being removed, So sometimes we can't go in on act as a preventative thing. And again, that's what we do, because we're the village that raised the child. We're the auntie, we're the grandmother. And you don't have to be blood related to be called an auntie. You don't have to be blood related to be called a nan. You want to see all the nans I got. All the little nannies, running around, but they're happy, they're healthy. I get really concerned that little 2-year-old babies are I just wonder if where's the what do you call it?
So I think we've lost your sound again.
He's ringing about the drive up there tomorrow. Can you ring him? Yeah. Sorry guys, we're all in a big we're leaving for the big carnival tomorrow. And that's another thing that GMAR does. We bring families together when carnivals, because we say that no child should be socially and athletically deprived because of no money. So, we ask around to all the organisations and even the bread shops and butchers or whatever, just so these children can get to, sporting events like the carnivals.
Wow.
Oh, what you doing?
And I wanted to add too that, I being part of GMAR, I'm on the GMAR email, running around trying to locate a bed for someone and a mattress for somebody, just so they can keep their kid at home, because Child Protection said if they don't have a bed by tomorrow night, the kid can't stay there. And I've even driven a bed from my house to Northcote for someone, just so that they can actually make sure that when Child Protection assesses them the next day, there's 5 beds there, not 4.
Mm.
So it's a real,
which is impractical, unrealistic, but it's like a David and Goliath fight. They hold the power. And so that we don't compromise the child being removed or not being returned to family, we jump through the hoops for them. I mean, when we did have, we had our funding around from Pay the Rent, we had back to school programs which would help once the mums families came back home. We supported mum with washing machines. We supported mum and dad with beds, because they didn't have their children with them for about 6 months or to 6 years. And another thing that I'm concerned about lately is children with ADD and emotional disorders and all that, if they're being removed from their parents, they're actually, there's proof, we've seen it, that a worker will just leave that child sitting near TV without any thing that a mother would done, that a mother or a father would have done to, I guess, what do you call it? When they have this, the kids with autism and stuff like that, intellectual
disability.
responders, like mum would give them the music or the feeling and all that. There is proof that these children, there's two that we know of, was put in a motel room and left there with a TV. Another one is in a resi unit with no family visiting and no sibling visiting. Understand that case, mum and dad are right off track with they're self-medicating really, really bad, but the grandmother never gave up. So the child is deprived from seeing the grandmother, the child is deprived from seeing the siblings, which legally is wrong.
Yeah.
And that's happening. And then we have reports where there's two cases we're taken to court. One child was raped in a resi care unit and they're admitting to it. They're all, see the email, see the minutes. So, we have reporters talking to that family now. And then we have another case where a young girl was sexually assaulted in a carer's house. And they're saying, oh, he's been assessed, the young man's been assessed and he's not of high risk. So they kept that child with that carer. Mind you, that carer is non-Aboriginal.
Yeah.
And we see those differences, sadly, that we have to, allay to them, but it's happening and it's sad.
We need to wind up, but I want to say one thing to you. If I gave you a magic wand, and not a broomstick where some people think you might need it, but the magic wand, because you are like a fairy godmother to people, what would you change?
I'd change a system where it's more flexible and it's got to be in line with non-Aboriginal children, because realistically there are going to be parents that can't look after their children, but hey, look at the grandparents, look at the aunties, look at the uncles, so I'd change all that. Change the colonised way of thinking about our mob.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Aunty Reio, for joining us tonight. As always, I love hanging out with you. And we'll talk soon. But I just want everyone to say thank you for Aunty Reio for joining us in tonight.
And thank you for coming, because this needs to be heard, because I believe if people are not talking about this, then people would think that it's not happening.
Yeah.
It is happening.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So thanks,
Opening
Aunty
up,
Reio.
eye-opening.
Thank you, darlings. All
Enjoy
have a
the
good night
carnival.
and wish us good luck for the carnival in the next 3 days.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Have
Thank
fun.
you.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
As they go off, guys, once again, we're finished. I'm going to talk to, we'll probably get this one transcribed a bit so you can actually hear or what was actually discussed all the way through. We've got 3 more sessions coming up. Next month, we've got Taylor Hampton and Shay Rottimer talking about embedding Aboriginal culture into curriculum. At session 10, session 11, we have got the wonderful Professor Kerry Arabina, talking a bit about the 1,000 days and the embedding Torres Strait Islander culture into our curriculum. And then early December, we have our final wrap-up for the AGECS series, which will have some special guests coming on. So guys, once again, I want to thank you for all hanging with us tonight. And we'll see you guys again next month.
Thank you, AJ. I just want to say thanks again to AJ. Just that was an amazing session, and thanks for persisting. Thanks everyone for persisting, because